So some of you may already know the things I'm about to read, but I'm reading it because it's part of the equation. And some of these things we're reading about sounds like America right now. We're even going to run in to two letters in a moment, A.M. Now, the third book that Moses penned was a Leviticus. And those of you that have been through Genesis 3, I said this is one of the proofs of what happened in Genesis 3. There's a whole list of sexual sins. I don't know if I need to read all of them or not. And they're in chapter 18, and they're in chapter 19. And if you read 20, I'm going to read parts from each of these chapters, because it sounds like you're reading stuff that's going on in America in 2020. And every time I go to Walmart, I think of one of these verses that I'm going to read to you today. Now, you have to pay attention, because people used to attack the Bible saying that what an awful God, because of the wholesale slaughter of the Canaanites when Joshua entered the land. Now, we're a couple books away from Joshua. We're just in the third book. Joshua will be in the sixth book. But guess what? The reason God allowed Joshua to do the wholesale slaughter of the Canaanites, the answer is in these chapters that I'm showing you. And I want you to think about how mad God was. Because most cities kill them, man, woman, and child. Now, what in the world could make him so mad? We're going to look. We're going to see it repeated here. He's going to repeat in a couple chapters of why he destroyed them. So here's all these sexual sins listed, verse by verse. And notice that in Leviticus 18:6, the Lord keeps saying it this way: to uncover the nakedness. Now, that's what we read in Genesis 9 that Ham did. So remember that it's clarified right here that we're talking about more than just looking. Now, this is chapter 108 in the Bible from Genesis 1. Now, I'm going to give you a 108 word. It doesn't make sense to you in Hebrew, chamas, but it means to make bare. And that's what is in this chapter. It's all about sexual sins. And I don't really need to read them all. You should read it. And it's talking about people related. And it's talking about all the different situations that men could be in having sex with their relatives. Now, before this, people did have sex with their relatives. I mean, the same old dumb questions. Where did Cain get his wife? Well, he got them from one of the girls that were born to Adam and Eve. And that's the only people that were here. And it was not forbidden then, because with Adam, when he was created, his blood was pure. And when Eve was created, her blood was pure. But you see, that was in the first millennium. We're now talking Leviticus, which is the third millennium, and the blood has deteriorated through the centuries and even the millenniums. So now it's forbidden to have sex or a marriage with someone close to kin. And as anyone knows in modern day science, there's a lot of problems on the birth of these children. So all of these questions that people fire at the Bible, they can all be answered in a very logical, sensible way. But like Dale said, most people have lost their sense. So how could they even look at things logically? Okay, now there's some special things. Number 1, in this chapter, like in verse 6, verse 7, verse 8, verse 9, it says uncover, verse 10, verse 11, verse 12, verse 13, verse 14, and verse 15, verse 16, verse 17, verse 18, verse 19. I wonder if anybody gets the point that when Ham uncovered his father's nakedness, it was more than just looking at him. And if you just think with 2 cents worth of IQ, how could Noah wake up and know what his younger son had done to him if he just looked at him? It makes no sense at all. But he knew his younger son had those tendencies because his younger son's wife had probably been complaining to him. Now you got to look at something real important here in verse 22. It's so important that I read about a guy in California that every time he went to a motel, he got out the Gideon Bible and tore this page out of the Bible and threw it in the trash can. Why? Because in Leviticus, 18:22, it says, "Thou shalt not lie with mankind as with womankind. It is abomination." Well, sorry about all the homosexuals, but this is what the word says. Now, he went to every motel he could get a hold of, pulled out the Gideon Bible, tore out that page, threw it in the trash can. That won't change God's law a bit. But look at their criticisms of this great book. Now, he was probably, if I remember correctly, in California. So let's notice something here, really important, that you'll need to know in the book of Revelation. And if you already know this, just be patient with me. In verse 24, it says, "Defile not ye yourselves in any of these things, for in all these the nations are defiled, which I cast out before you." This whole list of things, like in the verse before it, bestiality, he said all these nations were practicing this. Now we got to get a big verse, 25. "And the land is defiled, therefore I do visit the iniquity thereof upon it, and the land itself," here comes the big word, "vomiteth out her inhabitants. Ye shall therefore keep my statutes, my judgments. You shall not commit any of these abominations, neither any of your own nation, nor any stranger that sojourneth among you." Now notice he's repeating. We're talking about the Canaanites, the land that Abraham inherited. "For all these abominations," verse 27, "have the men of the land done, which were before you, and the land is defiled." Watch this big, important word in the King James Bible that no one should touch or change. Verse 26, "That the land" what? "Spew not you out also when you defile it, as it spewed out the nations that were before you." What book are we in? What does Revelation 3 say? What is the holographic stamp of approval on every chapter? In Revelation 3, there has to be something exactly pertaining to the third book of the Bible. And what did he say? He said they were naked. They were blind. They were rich, but they were naked. And he said, "I will spew you out of my mouth." Well, wait a minute. Revelation 3 is talking about the Laodicean church age. What do you think goes on in the church age? And these great leaders of so-called Christian organizations have been caught over the years with some of these abominations, especially homosexuality. Like Robert Liardon, who thought he was smart enough to correct William Branham and attack A.A. Allen, was caught in a homosexual act. I'm not going to give you a list. All you'd have to do is punch it in on Google or YouTube, and you'll see all kinds of big guys caught in homosexual affairs. Wait a minute. What are they doing at the head of so-called Christian organizations? And he said he was going to spew them out of his mouth. The tribulation's coming, and they don't even know it. They've gotten away with these things, and that includes Jim Baker, who was caught in homosexual affairs. I wouldn't turn on his program to watch it if you paid me $100 a minute. You want to know why? I'd be vomiting. Let's see what else we can find here. In this powerful 108th chapter, you should read it later because the Lord is very particular. What did 108 mean in Hebrew? To make bare. Now, 108 also is a Hebrew word, no use spelling it for you, but it means causes of banishment. So notice these are the causes that the Lord had to get those people out of that land. They were practicing all this. Who were they? The Canaanites and the other tribes that we described before in Bible studies previously from the Table of Nations in Genesis 10, telling you all the sons of Canaan and his relatives. And these are the people that are occupying the land. Now, when we go to the 109th chapter, which is 19th, this may not mean anything except to advanced students. I have my prime number chapters marked. 109 is the 29th prime number. Well, then it must be a prime chapter in God's great book, which is mathematically created. Now, there are a bunch of things in 109, and you can read it, but there's one I'm especially going to read because I think it is first every time I walk in the door at Walmart. You ready? I hope you know this. I hope you have this circled because I'm in verse 28. Let's see what the Lord said with all these rules and regulations. Ye shall not make any cuttings in your flesh for the dead, an old custom. Now what does it say? Nor what? Nor print any marks upon you. I am the Lord. When I go to Walmart, let me tell you, they don't have a sailor tattoo. They got it on their forearm and their biceps, and they got them on their ankles and their legs. The women got them on their toes and their feet and their calves and their thighs and both legs and both sides and up their neck and even on their face. You want to know something? I think the devil's children are marked. And I think they're going to be discarded. You can believe anything you want to. Guess what? I get to believe what I want to. And when I go to Walmart, here's fat grandma. And she's got to have 4 tattoos. I mean, grandma has to have them. And at 150 pounds overweight, I guess she thinks she's really sexy, huh? What is the matter with this generation? If you can't see it, it's at the doors. Now, I used chapter 110, which is Leviticus 20, in my original presentation on the Bible code, because there is a Hebrew word that just consists of 2 letters, an Ayin, 70, and a Mem, 40. AM equals 110. But the word translated in English is people. And you wouldn't have to look very far if you're getting bored at this lecture. Look and see how many words you can find and how many places you can find the word people and circle it in chapter 110. But you know what's strange? It's AM for people. Because when I read this, I think about America. Back when I was a boy, you had to go to the circus to see the tattooed woman. Now all you have to do is go to Walmart, and you don't even have to get inside before you'll find the tattooed woman. Women. Now, well, God's too hard. Too hard about what? Too hard about evil people, which pollute the planet. Notice he said you would defile the land. In Leviticus 20, verse 2, again thou shalt say to the children of Israel, whosoever he be of the children of Israel, or of the strangers that sojourn in Israel, that giveth any of his seed, we're talking about reproducing, unto Molech, he shall surely be put to death. The people of the land shall stone him with stones. Now there's something interesting in this chapter, because I said the proof of what happened in Genesis 3 is in book 3, because what did he tell Eve and Adam? Eve didn't listen at all. If you do this, in the day thou eatest, thou what? It's repeated over and over in chapter 20. If you do this sin, you do this. And he repeats some sexual sins. He says, thou shalt surely be put to death. So, people in America think anything goes. Who cares? We've been doing it for years. Yeah, people been dying and going to hell for years, and it's not full yet. It talks about all the sexual sins again. There's bestiality in verse 15. Some of the same ones are repeated. I'm going to read to you verse 13. If a man also lie with mankind as he lieth with a woman, both of them have committed an abomination. They shall surely be put to death. Their blood shall be upon them. Well, that's amazing, because things are accepted in America, where we got a major newscaster, Cooper Anderson, and he flaunts his homosexuality, and they just adopted a baby, and he said it's a dream come true. It's an abomination. It's because he's born into a super rich family on the evening news and not ashamed of the way he lives. And so many people, famous people like him. Why are things repeated? Why are they repeated in Leviticus 20, just like they were in Leviticus 18? Now notice the next chapter is triple ones, 111. We're in Leviticus 21. And the Lord is telling Moses, I want you to talk to the priest, the sons of Aaron. These are the men that are going to be ministering. Now, I want you to catch what he says and just tell me if he's too hard or he's prejudiced. Because he's telling these men that are going to be priests and going to be ministering that they're supposed to be holy. Let's see what he says in verse 7. We're in Leviticus 21:7. Thou shalt not take a wife that is a whore or profane, neither shalt thou take a woman put away from her husband. And he goes right on down the list here. Verse 9, he says, if the daughter of any priest, and she profanes herself by playing the whore, she already profaned her father, but she should be burnt with fire. So, if you would like to read what God was demanding of his priest and of his ministers, it covers different things like touching the dead. But if they're going to get married, what did he tell them? And he shall take a wife in her virginity, verse 13. Verse 14, a widow or a divorced woman or a profane or an harlot, these shall he not take, but he'll take a virgin. Look at the Lord keeping the priesthood pure. So, you may not like my next statement. I didn't write this book. I just studied this book for about 55 years. So men that had a blemish could not be a priest. But there's something overlooked in verse 18, and I'm going to end, even though this is a short Bible study, but important Bible study, in Leviticus 21, verse 18, for whatsoever man he be that hath a blemish, he shall not approach a blind man, a lame, wait a minute, did you see this? Or he that hath a flat nose. Now there was a prophecy from Noah on 3 different races of people. One of those races has flat noses. And it says right here, Moses said he couldn't be a priest because of that genetic flaw that is reproduced. Don't get mad at me if I read something you didn't like. This is what God said. It was important enough to put in the 3rd book. He dictated it to Moses, and all I can think about is AM for America. The people of America have profaned God's law. Send me a comment if you have time. Thank you for listening.